Welcome, Ambassador Hills. Good to have you here.
It's a pleasure to join you.
So let's start first about the trade issues with China and why that's not affecting General Motors. General Motors has decided they're going to produce in China.
I think there's a great deal of uncertainty with respect to the trade with China, and so it may not have affected the past with GM, but I would not want to be leading GM and have this go on for a long period of time.
Well, if you were leading GM, you might feel good that the president didn't say anything bad about you last time about getting rid of jobs. But how would you feel about what he had to say about his negotiations with President Xi? Because there wasn't a lot in that speech.
There was very little on trade, really only 3 points. And he did say, well, we want good rules. We want fair rules, and we also want them to buy more product. And so, you know, we do have our differences with China that are built upon reason. There are percentage caps on our investment. You know, there are 2 norms that China agreed to when it joined the World Trade Organization: national treatment and non-discrimination. And they have not given us national treatment, and they have discriminated. So we need to fix that.
So let's talk about that discrimination in one particular area, and that is payment systems. I talked recently to Dan Schulman, who's the CEO of PayPal, and this is what he had to say about the importance to him of getting into the Chinese market, which has not been easy for a lot of Western payment systems. This is what he had to say.
We have 1% of the market. Even in China, you are still seeing a tremendous move from cash to digital. So I think there's room for multiple players in this. This is not a winner-take-all market. That's one of the nice things about this market is it's growing so quickly that there's room for every player in it.
And you can hear more of that interview with Dan Schulman tonight on Big Decisions. That's at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time. So he's saying, look, there's a huge market there. It's a huge opportunity. The question is, can they get in? Because as I understand it, the Mastercards, the Visas of this world have not had an easy time of it.
Well, letting Mastercard and Visa in will be in China's interest. They are funneling state capital into state-owned enterprises that are not making money, and they're restricting the opportunities for the private sector that is making money. If they let these companies in, they would actually advance their growth and the applause of the Chinese citizenry. So it's a win-win. It is not that we're trying to force something that is bad for China.
It makes good sense. Not everything that makes good sense gets done in the world, in my experience. And you've negotiated with the Chinese. When you talk about things like state-owned enterprises and reform there's a lot of issues, including employment issues for President Xi and his support of his people. Is it realistic to think that President Trump can get them to change their economy fundamentally with respect to, for example, state-owned enterprises?
I think you cannot make them be a democracy. They want a communist system. However, I think that Zhu Rongji and Deng Xiaoping showed that you can minimize the state-owned enterprises. Zhu Rongji laid off a lot of people, but he had a program for them. He didn't throw them into the river. And they have to deal with that issue, because if they continue to give subsidies to companies that are zombies, they're not going to achieve the kind of growth that a bulk of the population wants to see.
We don't have a deal with China yet. We didn't hear one announced last night in the State of the Union address. At the same time, to give President Trump his due, has he made more progress in at least getting the Chinese government's attention than recent presidents have?
Well, he's certainly gotten the attention, not only of the Chinese, but of Americans that have built pipelines. I mean, we have dealt with them. I think that we should probably have stood up in an enforcement stature with respect to the non-discrimination. These percentage caps don't make any sense at all. And if you can only own a minority percentage in a company, then your intellectual property, your plans are open for copying. And that's one of our basic complaints.
And finally, let's come back to something you said. The Chinese have committed to things in the past, and it hasn't come to pass. What about the enforcement? Whatever they agreed to, whether it's access, market access, whether it's reform, whether it's structural changes, how do we know they're going to do it?
We should have a strategy. And the best strategy, in my view, based upon experience, would have been to join hands with all those that are on our side on this issue, Europe, Canada, Japan, South Korea, and confronted China and said, you wanted to be in the World Trade Organization. You promised non-discrimination. Let's fix it. You give us how soon you're going to move in each of these areas where we have legitimate complaints, and we'll work with you. But if you can't, you don't belong in the organization, and then we have, you know, not the WTO rules to govern. We could be as harsh as we wished.